Visit Avery.com, Avary, for the most up-to-date news and information on Team Avery.
Avery, 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 Avery.
The Video Archives podcast with Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery is back for season 2. Head on over to patreon.com/videoarchives to get ad-free exclusive content and bonus episodes. This is The Gala Show. I'm your reporter on the beat, Gala Avery. On this episode, I've got 2 guests on the mic. They are a filmmaking duo. You may know them from their 2019 movie Villains, or perhaps from 2022's Significant Other. Or, if you're like me and you like going to the movies, you will have seen the trailer for their latest film and also all of the billboards all over Los Angeles, Novocaine, where an everyday guy played by Jack Quaid has the girl of his dreams kidnapped. It's up to him to turn his inability to feel pain into a superpower to get her back. Today on the mic, I've got Dan Berk and Bobby Olsen. Hey guys.
Hey, thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having me. And your house is really cute.
Thank you for calling it a house. It is a 1-bedroom apartment and a small one.
It's
the
more
listeners
important.
don't know that. I mean, we could have gotten away with it.
I mean, you have a patio.
Yes,
that
that's
means
true.
it's a house.
That is a rare
it's a
thing.
home.
Yes,
it's a
I
home.
It gets great light.
I do have
That's
a
what matters.
grave plot sized backyard back there. It's private.
It's like Nosferatu size.
Yeah,
exactly. So before we bring up the topic for today, I have a question for each of you. And you guys, I'm guessing will have different answers, but maybe the same one. I don't know. What was the movie that got you interested in filmmaking?
Okay, I would probably have to say Terminator 2.
I mean, not Terminator 1, but T2.
No, T2, yeah. As a kid, I just I loved it so much. And I think that was the first movie that I watched dozens of times. And there were a couple of years where I feel like I watched it every day with my friend. And I think watching a movie that many times, that's when you start to be able to kind of discern the language of film within it. I think, that's obviously something that doesn't come naturally to most kids, maybe to some, maybe Damien Chazelle or something. But I think to watch a film that many times over and over, you start to learn the edit cadence and things like that. And it started, I started asking questions to myself about how certain special effects were done and everything. And, obviously that was a pretty good filmmaker to try and learn from.
Exactly. And also when you recognize that it is a movie, it's like an art form.
Yeah.
And you start getting to it. What about you?
There's probably a few answers. I think I didn't grow up in a film family, so I didn't have what a lot of filmmakers seem to have these days, which is my parents love to show me old French New Wave stuff.
Same.
There was none of that for me. But my dad took me to see Scream when I was probably too young for it. I think I was 9 years old or something, and he took me to that. And I remember that was a very eye-opening experience because I don't know if that made me go, oh, I want to be a filmmaker, but it was the genre blend of that movie, because obviously it's very scary, but it's also hilarious. I was like, oh, okay, you can kind of use both of those paints and mix them on the palette. And that was very exciting. I think also around that time, maybe a little earlier, I remember being really into farce comedy with I remember I probably watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail 500 times, and just that you could lean into the silliness. I think that those are movies that our adults can enjoy, but also an 11-year-old boy would be
I had Killer Bunny Rabbit slippers
Yes,
when I was a
of
kid
course.
from
Let's go.
thinky.com or whatever.
It's Just a Flesh Wound is seared into my brain so hard. And I think those that is where when Bobby and I were older, we both in high school were, we didn't know each other yet, but we were both doing the same exact thing, which is making dumb little short films with our friends with the high 8 camcorder that from my parents' attic. And those kind of faux medieval sort of sword and sandal, but farce comedy is what that was a space they all existed in. So I think you could probably draw a line from Monty Python to me actually trying to start making movies.
It's Terminator 2, Monty Python, and Scream all in one.
Yeah.
That's what we're getting here.
Yeah.
I love it. Now, as always, my guest gets to bring their topic to the mic. So, Dan and Bobby, why don't you tell us what your topic is and why you decided to choose it?
Our topic is creative partnership, and we chose it because it is, of course, sort of foundational to our working process.
Pretty relevant.
And it's also something that we get questions about constantly when we do Q&As and when we're doing press on movies, because it is kind of whether you're talking about film or really any art form, a lot of the times the assumption is that it's a very singular vision that leads to the creation of art.
A director is a dictator.
Exactly, yeah. Or at least that's the perception of it, which we kind of disagree with a little bit.
We're co-dictators.
Exactly. There can be two. This is more of an oligarchy. So either way, it seems like it's something that people kind of want to see the inside of and demystify a little bit. So we thought it could be a fun topic.
But before we get into the topic, it's time for a commercial break. Back by popular demand, the Video Archives merch store is up and running. Get your favorite t-shirts, hats, notebooks, stickers, and more at videoarchivesmerch.com. You know me. I write all my notes in the Notes on Cinema notebook, the Gala edition, of course. Check out videoarchivesmerch.com to get yours today. Hey, thanks so much for being a loyal listener. If you want to keep up with me off mic, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Gala Avery. And we're back. So that's our topic for today, creative partnerships. I have 30 minutes on the clock and our time starts now. So how did you guys meet?
We were randomly assigned roommates freshman year at NYU. So, we owe our entire careers to the bursar office at NYU.
Or whatever algorithm they used.
Yeah, did they use an algorithm or did you guys fill
I don't know
out
if
like
algorithms were a thing yet. I'm not
I don't
sure.
know. We didn't have algorithms
The
back
algorithm
then.
was like the old lady in the
Yeah,
department.
right.
Exactly.
But did
Yeah,
you
I'm
guys
pretty
fill
sure
out like a form or
No.
something, like interest?
No, I mean
Not at all.
the mix of our sort of suite that we were in at the Third North dorm was, some people were in film, some were in acting, but some were in the business school and stuff like that. So
I think it was totally fate, or I'm sorry,
Yeah.
totally chance, rather.
yeah, I think
Or
it's just
fate.
ping
Or
pong
fate.
balls.
Yeah, it was
I think
fate,
you
but
get
it
to
was also
put
chance.
you got to say which dorms you got to put like your top 3 or something like that. I remember there was like something like that.
I think Third North was at the bottom of my list, though. I remember I wanted to be in Hayden. 'Cause
Yeah,
that's what I'd heard.
I didn't know
was, like,
what
the cool
to pick,
dorm.
so I think I maybe also put Hayden there. But anyway, it worked out, and I think that's the thing, is that we were best friends for years before we ever started to be in a creative partnership, and so I think that's what makes it work, is having that foundational relationship, so that we can have whatever creative arguments we want without it ever really affecting our relationship under that. I think it's like having a sibling, and the way that you can like get into a fight and have it not actually affect you. The next day you're just right back to being siblings. And I think, without that, the creative process can be a little slow if you have to like couch everything, or like, use kid gloves when you're talking to each other and stuff. Like, we talk to each other like brothers, you know what I mean? And so we can kind of cut through the bullshit. And, when you're two minds making one creative product, there's gonna be disagreements and stuff like that, and yet that is where all of our best ideas come from, is when we have a disagreement about something and it winds up synergizing into something new. And so I think if we didn't have that best friendship underneath it all, I think it would be a lot harder to kind of keep it together.
I think the term that's most important that you just use is brothers, because when Quentin and Roger talk, especially my dad, they're always like, we can fight like brothers.
Yeah.
And then the next day it's like, hey buddy, want to go see a movie?
Yeah.
And it's like, you just kind of move on from that. And that's a really unique relationship.
Yeah, well, I think it's like the nature of, there are different kinds of arguments in life when you're dealing with other people, right?
Yep.
There's an argument where you both know that ultimately you're on the same team, and these are good faith arguments where each of you thinks that one idea is better for the project. Those are arguments that creative partners get into, and it's easy. The second you step into like, I don't like your idea because you're a fucking idiot. That's when you start to like erode at that trust that exists beneath it. And the thing about actual brothers is, you have this lifetime of like love, and of course there's quarreling and stuff, but you know that you love each other, your family, and that's why you can, you're never worried about like eroding so much that you destroy the bedrock, and it's like and it falls
it's just
apart.
over, like the relationship itself is completely over.
Right.
So were you guys both film majors?
No, I was actually I was an acting major, and I switched over.
Bobby's
to
a very
film.
good actor, honestly.
Oh, thank you very much.
He is. He really is. He's-
Have you ever
I'll
considered like
send my
acting
headshot to you.
in your own
No, I mean
movies?
we didn't not anymore, just because like there's enough work to be done with directing, and I think it would really like skew the dynamic
Yeah.
if all of a sudden I was jumping in there. And
He does have a voiceover bed in Novocaine.
Oh,
There's like a
really?
motivational speaker at the beginning, a few minutes into the movie, that is Bobby's voice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, so I was in the acting program, and after a while, the thing is, NYU is extremely expensive, and I was paying for it all with student loans and stuff, and so when you're as awesome and foundational and informative as so many of those classes were, at the end of the day, I just like, I didn't feel like I was getting enough out of it. It was just, you go in there, you're doing rehearsals and stuff. You're trying to, imagine a cup of coffee in your hand and what does it smell like and all that. And you're like, this is $50,000 a year. So then and all of my friends were in the film program, and I was seeing them, getting to really go and make things, like these sight and sound projects where you're going out and actually, shooting on 16 millimeter film and all this stuff. And so I wound up making the switch over to film and did that for a couple of years, and then I sort of like found the sweet spot. I love acting or whatever, but the process of being an actor is, I think, I have a lot of respect for the people who can stomach it, because it's difficult and there's a lot of rejection that you have to deal with. I love all elements of film, and so I think once I realized how much fun it was to actually make a movie, it was an easy decision to make that pivot.
But Dan, you were a film major?
I was a film major from the start, an OG film major, and I had a minor in producing. So that was kind of where we started, was like basically during school, myself, Bobby, and two other guys, Chad Harbold and Brian Gaynor, the four of us created a sort of a little production company collective, doing like short form stuff, music videos, commercials, sketches, anything really to keep the lights on, like corporate event coverage, New York Fashion Week,
Wow, you
whatever
guys
it
were,
was.
like, actually like
we were,
Yeah. If somebody
doing
would
it.
pay us money to like shoot something with a camera, we were doing it.
Yeah,
and that's
we were
where
hustling.
we kind of got so many of our early reps in.
Yeah, and so at that point, like I was kind of producing everything, and there were actually some, much more than Bobby's experience in the drama school, there were actually some very practically useful classes that I took as a part of that producing minor. There was like a boards and budgets class that like taught you how to use like movie magic budgeting and movie magic scheduling and stuff.
such an important
So
skill.
important, I know, and I wish
it
that
feels
there
like
was
a
more of
dark
that.
art.
Totally, yeah. And there were like line producing classes where you like kind of just broke budgets down and figured out. So either way, I was producing everything, like Bobby and the other guys were directing and writing stuff, and then sort of throughout that process, as we graduated, and the company was doing well enough, but we all really wanted to make features, and eventually Bobby and I kind of not broke off. We're still very close friends with those guys, but we both realized that our creative sensibilities were really aligned, and we wanted to start working together in earnest a little bit more. And so we started writing together, and we wrote a few screenplays, and found that we really wanted to direct them, of course, but no one lets you direct anything until you direct something. It's a paradigm.
Yeah, it's like, how do you
or a
direct
paradox
if you
rather?
haven't
Yeah,
directed yet?
exactly.
Yes.
So in any event, we did what we could to figure out a feature that we could actually make. And so there was a friend of a friend who had this like giant, his father had this giant mansion, like a vacant mansion in Westport, Connecticut. And the kid wanted to be a producer, and we were like, hey, if you let us like use this house as a shooting location, you can be a producer on the movie. And so we got a house, and then we basically wrote a script that just a story that backed into that location. In the midst of all this, I was realizing I really wanted to do more directing. Bobby wanted to do more producing. And so we basically just said like, hey, let's just like cut our hands open, shake hands, and just do like a blood pact that for life, we're going to just split everything 50-50, the responsibilities, credits, money, everything. And it was such a freeing moment for us and a really kind of pivotal decision that we made, because once you're actually in partnership with someone and you know like, okay, we're a unit now, you're not like creatively cagey about anything. You know, sometimes if you're like working with a partner but you don't always work together and this and that, you might like keep one of your really good ideas for later or something. But we're just like, now we're in, it's, if we have a kernel of an idea that's good, it's like we just can throw it out and start batting it around and see if it resonates with the other guy. And it just really unlocked the swing when we did that.
Yeah, you really have to just like find a way to kill your ego, and and once you do that, the creative floodgates really open, and we just became so much more productive after we sort of came to that lifelong pact.
The understanding of who like
Exactly.
you guys are together.
Yeah.
I've been working with my dad since I was 15.
Sure.
So God, 15 years now. I'm coming up on my 15th year of working with my dad.
That's
and
incredible.
so
Wild.
and he's told me all about, he's had, as you said, like you have some creative partners that you work with only sometimes, and you
Yeah.
have some that you work with all the time.
Right.
And when you have that understanding that like this is the person I work with all the time, there is no ego. There is no, this is my idea and not yours. Like don't touch it.
Totally. Well, and I can't even imagine the idea of working with multiple creative partners, because in many ways, this partnership is a marriage, you know. I mean, it's a marriage with maybe only half the physical intimacy of our real marriages. But really, like, I mean, I know if it was like, oh, we're working on this project together, like so we get together next week same time, and you're like, oh no, I'm actually working with Kyle next week.
Oh,
I'd be
my
like,
God.
well, does Kyle give you something that I don't? I mean, why?
Thinking about that is heartbreaking.
Yeah,
It's
it's
being cheated
it's
on.
making
Yeah.
exactly. That's what I'm getting at. It would be
Yeah.
that bad. And I think once there is any kind of engine within the partnership that can create feelings like that of resentment and betrayal, and trust being shattered, you're dead.
Yeah.
You're dead in the water. Like,
Well, and we go really out of our way to be constantly checking in with each other and making sure that other person feels seen and heard. And we literally have, these summits where we'll go to Joshua Tree and just spend the weekend together and just have like a check-in on things and like make sure like, are you feeling good? I'm feeling good, and air any, dirty laundry if there was something that
If he has
you
a
were upset
grievance.
about.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
And it
totally.
winds up being this like incredible, we are sort of each other's therapists in that way. And I think it's something that like does not come naturally to do, I think, especially for like guys. And it's, I think it's just like, that's been the most rewarding part of this partnership, I think, is just like the care that we have for one another, and just like always trying to make sure that the other person feels involved. And because there's a lot of, there's always going to be, we're a duo, and I think most films are used to a single director. So sometimes it's like, there's the good seat at the, basketball game that your agent's got you, or there's like who's sitting shotgun and this or that. And so we're just making sure that like, we're always mixing it up and be like, okay, last time there was like a cool perk that only one of us got to do. I did it, so you take this one and stuff. It's fun.
yeah.
I think that's really important also, because you guys, besides having a working relationship, have a personal relationship. And as you said, that's like the foundation for why you can work together.
Yeah.
And if you erode the personal relationship, you have nothing.
You have nothing.
And
Totally.
especially also, I mean, there are lots of creative partnerships though that like the Coen brothers come to mind.
Absolutely.
That like they have been able to, I mean, they are like literally brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the Wachowskis.
Well,
Well, there's
I was thinking-
so many of between the Duffers, the Wachowskis, the Safdies, there's a reason that it works.
Well, yeah, and I don't think that is. I don't think that's indicative of the fact that brothers create natural partnerships. I think it's a survivorship bias thing where the brotherhood is what keeps it alive. There's probably a lot of attempted partnerships that fail because they don't have that bedrock of love and trust and respect. That's why I think you see a lot of brothers. But we always talk about this, that there's a lot of in the independent space, there's a lot of partnerships, directing partnerships. But as you get up into the studio ecosystem, there are less. I mean, you could probably count them on two hands, you know?
Yeah.
And there's certainly a lot, there's a bunch in TV. But on the feature side, there's only a handful of them. And part of it is because the DGA makes it really hard. You know, we had to like go in front of the Western Council and like, you know, it's all very ceremonial, and because they don't want a lot of partnerships.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
And even with the WGA, my dad and I, because we're technically a partnership, but like
Yeah.
every single time we do a contract, they need us to divide how we're paying it.
Yeah,
and all that
totally.
Stuff. And for me, it's like, well, it's my dad. Like, I know he's not going to
Yeah.
screw me
Totally.
over. And
Yeah.
like, he knows
Yeah.
I'm not going to
No, and
screw
I mean,
him
we-
over. But they don't trust that.
Yeah.
And we certainly understand
Yeah.
why the DGA does that, because they don't want, you know, some studio to go out there and be like, oh, we're going to hire this like director quartet and we're going to split them off and
Yeah.
have them do the work of it, and we're going to pay them as one director and all this stuff, you know.
Yeah,
like,
most of these protocols that you now see are there because in like 1937 they did a movie where they, you know, fired a new director every week, and like, you know, they just did what they could to like squeeze the working
squeeze
class
the working
directors.
man, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, do you also think, though, that it's because when you are in a creative partnership, you have complete trust with the other person? Like, you guys know that like, you will always have each other's backs, like, no matter what's happening. And maybe at the studio level, they don't want someone to have each other's back. Maybe
That's
perhaps they want the producer to have more control, or the
it's-
video village, as we'll say. to
Sure.
have
No,
the
and that's-
chorus.
interesting theory.
That's definitely possible. And that is, you know, again, there's a lot of like sort of perils and maybe points of concern with partnership, but there's also so many positives. And that really is one, just the idea of having each other's backs and having a sounding board, like outside of the creative process, just navigating the business avenues of Hollywood, and especially as things get higher and higher stakes, as your budgets get higher and expectations get higher. I can't imagine doing it alone. It would be so isolating and scary. If
well, and
you're
you would
making the
never
right
know
decision.
if something is good or not. You know, I mean, it's so much of, I think that our quality comes from is the fact that everything's tested all the time. You know, like the way that we write, you know, one of us will take a pass on the first act, hand it to the other person. They rewrite first act, write act two, part one, you know, and so on and so forth. And so you're constantly being checked by that other person, and that's just like a filter that, you know, that you don't get if you're one person, where like you can get carried away and get into your own head and kind of lose track of what works. And then as far as the studio system goes, I think the fact that there's two of us really helps us as studio filmmakers, because we've obviously been we started in the independent world.
Yeah, now you're in the studio world.
Exactly. And I think that the studio world is, you're dealing with so many more cooks in the kitchen. You know, you have
all of Video Village.
exactly. There's a lot more people
village.
over your shoulder. There's a lot more, you know, even in prep and development and all these things, you have a lot of voices and a lot of powerful voices, like people who can fire you and stuff.
Yeah.
And so you have to be collaborative to work in the studio system. And we're already that way because there's two of us. We've been collaborating for as long as we can remember.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask is, how do you guys divide your work? Because I know every creative partnership divides it completely differently. Like my dad and I, for example, like he says I'm really good at framing the house. So like I'm really good at building out the outline and building up the script. And then he's really good at coming in and like putting out, like painting the walls and like
Yeah.
lighting, like choosing which sconces to put up. Like he's
Yeah.
like dialogue and stuff. And I'm good with structure and he's good with dialogue. But it seems like you guys kind of do like a first pass, second pass. Like you guys just ping pong it.
We always say that like we're not specialists like that. It's not like one of us is like, you know, the camera director and the other one's the actor director. Like we're both generalists. Like we both do you know, we both do everything. Our whole thing is like, we always want the fact there's two of us to be an asset, not a liability. Like you can come up and ask one of us a question. You don't have to ask both of us. And you know, for us, it's just about being on the same page all the time. So like the night before a given shoot, we will read through the pages that we're going to do the next day, and we'll like read the voices to each other. You know, we'll act out the scene. And then that way you can even see like, oh, is that how you think that line was going to be said? I always thought it was going to be more like this. And you can have that discussion beforehand so that you're a unified front, like once you get on set.
Yeah, and I think on the writing side, it's the same thing. And I think even, of course, every partnership is different. So it's like that works for you and your dad, and that's great. But I think for us, I could see, I think we strive hard to remain generalists, and that we are both capable of doing everything and just trying to rewrite each other's work to make it better and better. I think if we started to kind of compartmentalize the
Yeah,
parts
and,
of
like,
the parts of
differentiate
the
who
creative
gets
process.
what.
I could see that being a potential future seed
Yep.
of resentment. And
Yeah,
again,
like,
it's like our
why
goal.
do you get to do it, the actors?
yeah,
and
or-
why
that
am
or
I
would be
at
the little like
camera?
sand grain of sand
Yeah,
that
well,
turns
and-
into an oyster of
Yeah,
jealousy
and I
or
think,
a
and
pearl.
I think, and even looking at it not in that in the toxic way, but I think it could have a chilling effect on either of us. Like if you were the dialogue guy and I thought of a great line, I might just keep it in my head because I'm like, well, I'm not the dialogue guy. I probably shouldn't suggest that. Whereas right now we're like existing in this beautiful, free, creative space
yeah.
where
Like, why do we have to put labels on anything?
yeah,
man?
exactly,
You know?
right.
Yeah.
It just
So like
free
if you
love.
have an idea, you'll just tell him and you're like, yeah, I had this idea, and
Yes.
then kind of
Oh, yeah.
from there you guys just
like
develop
multiple
it together.
times a week we get on, whether we work together, like we often work together, but since Zoom became a thing, we also
Do you guys find it easy to do Zoom though together? Like sometimes the digital thing
no,
just
yeah,
like,
No, it's way better
Yeah,
to be
in-person sessions are always more productive, especially when you're like brainstorming or trying to break a story.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when we're writing, we remain separate, but the point is, whether we're together or on Zoom, like multiple times a week, one of us will be like, I had the craziest idea last night. It's just a little kernel. Like we can discuss it later, but I'll just give you the log, a log. And it's never a fully formed thing. Like I forget what book did you read? It was the Pixar book or something that was like that they like
Oh, yeah, it was
encourage
like-
people to share ideas
Yeah,
as
exactly.
early
Yeah,
as
it was
humanly
like
possible.
Working together or something. Was
No,
it
working
that
together.
one,
Well, I
or-
was going to mention working together. That one's
Oh
about,
no,
that was
yeah,
about
I know
partnerships.
The other,
but
yeah, the other.
it was the Pixar one, wasn't it?
Yes.
Well, either
yes,
way,
Lassiter and stuff.
yeah, Bobby read a book a few years ago that was like all about like the idea of like, because there might be an instinct sometimes when you have an interesting idea to like build it out in your head for a few days before sharing it, which totally makes sense if the group that you're with is not this partnership. Yeah. But like we sort of try to just share things as early as possible, even if it's just like an image or just an idea, or the broadest little flash of an idea, and that because that tends to. Many times what happens is one of us has an idea, and even in your head, you might have an idea of the trajectory it's going to go, but you share it early enough, and then the other one will, send it in a whole new direction that's so much better. And if
Yeah,
if you had closed,
a lot of times you have just it's not a fully fleshed out idea. It's just something. It's like, hey, what if we did X, and then the other person be like, well. That's great, but I feel like that's a little bit like this other movie. But what if we did exactly what you said, but set it in the 70s, and and then that gets somebody else going to be like, oh, that would be so cool. And like, what if we did this kind of thing where he was like this hippie, and
and that's the most exciting. That is the most exciting part of the process when you don't have to contend with all of the actual outlining and writing yet, and you're just like, this idea is killer. It's so great, and then you actually have to start the hard work. But we love having those conversations.
do you guys ever do it where it's like one of you guys will have an idea and the other one has a completely different idea and somehow you guys kind of fuse them together?
Oh,
or do you
yeah,
guys kind of
definitely.
keep stories like
No, for sure.
separate?
Also we've been working together so long. We've written probably like 40 to 50 screenplays, and I had a lot of ideas that we've outlined and written a few pages of and abandoned.
Yeah, I know how that is.
We're very quick to be like, you know what, this one's not working, or this has this Achilles heel.
Or
that's not
maybe in
gonna...
like a few years we'll return to
Totally,
it.
yeah.
I'm
You
not
can't
the
be
right
afraid
person
to
right
just
now.
like move on
Yeah.
from something if it's just not working. I think that's something that we learned how to do. And what's great is that even those ideas that you move on from, a lot of times they wind up popping back up because you get someone will ask you like, hey, we want to reboot this franchise or something. Like it's totally wide open. We don't really know what the thing is. And then we can kind of look back in our catalog and be like, wait a minute, that idea that we had, in 2013 would actually work really well for this if you put it through the filter of what this movie's supposed to be. And so a lot of times those wind up just bubbling back up or like you said, two different ones sort of coming together.
That
and
like literally
synergizing.
happened 72 hours ago.
Yeah.
Oh,
With
really?
like two ideas that were like one was 1 year old and one was 10 years old, and they both just like kind of fit together in a really interesting dovetail for something that we're considering pitching on. And it's just a really nice thing that happens. It's like we have this closet in the backs of our brains that are like, just all these little ingredients that you can throw into a stew potentially.
Yeah.
So for people that want to get into the industry and maybe they want to form a creative partnership with someone, what would you say to like look out for?
Well, I mean, like we said, we get that question a lot, and I think
If you feel alone in the world, you need a partner.
well, but that's the thing is that we always caution against like don't get a partner just to get a partner. Like I feel like that never really works.
It's like when you're looking for love.
Exactly.
That's when you don't
yeah,
find
yeah.
it.
The watched pot never boils kind
Right.
of thing. Like, I think that it's so important that if you have somebody that is a creative person that you're super close with, great. But I don't think that, you should necessarily I think a lot of times the desire for a partnership can just be writer's block or something. You know what I mean? Like, and you got to figure out whether that's something, are you really missing that other person, or is there just something about your creative process right now that you're in a bit of a funk and you just need to get through it? Because I mean, again, being in a partnership is a lot of work and relationship maintenance. And if you're not best friends or siblings or something, then that stuff feels like that. All that relationship maintenance comes naturally to us because we're best friends. And I think if we had just found each other on Craigslist a couple of years ago, it would not work that way.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel so like you guys talk about the relationship maintenance? That's like seems like it's an integral part though, just to be
yeah.
open and honest with each other.
Yes.
Do you guys ever have to take time apart to kind of like?
We've never had to take time apart, but we've certainly had.
I mean, you guys have been creative partners for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, listen, some of this is not process; it's just magic. Like, we're just
Yeah.
very lucky that we found each other. Like, we just have a very, very similar brains, and
Do you guys ever feel like you're in each other's brains?
oh yeah,
Oh my god, my
constantly.
dad and I are constantly
yeah,
in each
totally.
other's
But
brains.
that makes a little more sense. Yeah,
Well, it's funny.
because there's a genetic link.
Well, my
there.
dad is also like, he always says, I had to birth my partner. I had to create
so
my
funny.
own writing partner.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I think that is the other. Yeah, sorry, we're so lucky. That was the end of that question. But to your point before, I think that is also there are other perils to partnership that aren't as obvious. There's all the work that goes into it that Bobby was mentioning, but also a lot of times, and it's totally understandable, people there is an ego inherent in creating art. Like you think that you have a message that's worth, or a story worth telling, a message worth getting out to the world. And when you're in a partnership, you are by definition sharing authorship, and for some people that might inherently create resentment automatically. And, genuinely stripping away that ego is really hard and unnatural for someone trying to create art. Like when the thing comes out, it's like, it's both of us that, like it's not, and you can't stand up and be like, this is mine, and a lot of artists might not be okay with that, and they might not realize that when they're getting into it.
But also, just to your point about, whether we get sick of each other, we came from a place of being college best friend. Like we used to spend every day together and
You
live
guys love each
together.
other.
We do love each other.
So now, we have our own families and stuff. Like I think we get breaks from each other now all the time that are built to the point where like I think we wish we could hang out even more.
No, I think it's so great because it's almost like a magical relationship that's formed.
Yes.
You guys found like just by chance or by fate or by the old lady and the person.
The lady in the person
I
office.
just knew like these two were supposed to be put together and you guys like comets hit each other.
Yeah.
And you guys are making art together. And I think it is special because especially when you have to think about if a partnership goes bad, what do you do? And you guys have been together for so long and I don't think it's going to go bad. Like, I think
our
you
hope.
guys are fine.
Oh, well, we appreciate that assessment, and we hope that that's true. I mean, we look at older partners, partnerships, whether it is the Coen brothers or the Wachowskis or whatever, and often you see in later life they do end up splitting.
Well,
up.
like the Coen brothers are a good example because like they every now and then they'll split up and maybe one has an idea that the other one doesn't really want to do, or maybe one's busy with something else, and so it's like, hey, I'll just go do this idea that I had, but they're still able to come back together.
Yeah, I know, and that's interesting. And it's funny because right now in our lives, I can't imagine that.
I can't really picture it.
Well,
but
also because it is that filter. I feel like if I had an idea and Bobby was like, I'm not excited about that idea, there's a part of my brain that I'm like, well, maybe he's right. If that is the first test that an idea has to pass, that it excites us both. And that has worked so well that I just cannot imagine a scenario. And maybe, listen, check back in 35 years.
Yeah.
I know,
when we're
season
old
35
men.
of the Gala Show.
Right, yeah, but like I can't imagine being like, you know what, I like this idea so much that I'm going to forget that. Even though that has worked so well for us, I'm going to forget that integral part of our process.
And I don't really want to do it alone.
Yeah,
Where
right.
like, part of the fun of this, I think the reason our movies are what they are is because of how much we love each other and how much that joy kind of filters into
The
it.
brotherhood.
Yeah, and I think if we didn't have that, it just like wouldn't be as fun. Like the idea of directing a movie on my, it's like I have never felt like, ooh, it'd be so cool to be the only director. That's
I know.
terrifying
I
to me.
know.
Like if we didn't have each other to like, you know, after some awful pitch that we bomb or, you know, some getting yelled at by some producers, if we couldn't like make each other laugh after that, I think I would go insane. I would definitely have like a lot more panic attacks.
No, I love this conversation because this is exactly how I feel with my dad. Like, I remember I did one, he convinced me to do like one solo writing project and I did it and I just hated it. I was like, when can I come back to like doing it with you?
Yeah.
Like, why am I
It's
doing
just
this?
less fun. Like,
It's not, that's the thing. And yes, I'm in this industry and you guys are in this industry because we're dreamers and we
Yeah.
have a dream. But I'm also here to have fun. And
Yeah.
I'm here to create. And I don't think
And
you
that's
can
okay.
create unless
Yeah.
you're having fun and you're having a good time. I
Definitely.
mean, filmmaking is hard work.
Yeah.
But as you said, at the end of the day, if you can lean on each other after like that terrible night shoot where just nothing
Yeah.
has gone right,
Yeah.
you have each other. For me, it's mostly, I like how you guys have talked about how you deal with maybe they only want to have one person in one place or like only like
Oh, yeah.
acknowledge one.
Yeah.
The fact that you guys are able to switch off so easily
Yeah.
is just, I think,
No, it's
really.
I mean, it's taken time. I mean, the process has been refined. You know, year over year, project over project, script over script.
I'm just hoping though that they eventually like, oh, there are 2 directors. Let's just do 2 seats.
Yeah,
no, it's
That'd be
wild.
nice.
It is
That'd be
wild,
nice.
like how many times that happens where you're just like, don't they know that we would be sensitive to this? Like, couldn't they just get 2 of the things or whatever? But like I said, it always works.
We are
out.
experiencing that less and less. I think.
Yes.
As we
No.
get
Well,
as we
I
climb
think
the ladder.
especially you're in the studio realm
Right.
now. It's like, how did you guys decide to go Berk and Olsen? Because I see you guys referred to.
We got this question the other day.
Well, because my godfather is part of a music duo,
Sure.
Tom and Andy, and I
Yeah.
always ask like, why isn't it Andy and Tom?
Yeah.
Because usually it's
Right.
alphabetical.
Totally.
Well, I mean, for a couple of reasons. First, I think it rolls off the tongue a little better to be like single syllable, multiple syllable last name or whatever. But also, when it came to that, we were like, how do we want to do this? Do we want to just like do we want to swap every project or something?
that would be too wild.
And we're just like, you know what? No, because like then it's gonna be like, oh wait, is this one kind of Bobby's movie and then the next one's Dan's
Again,
You
movie?
a
guys should just have
potential
the same
resentment
last
thing.
name and
I know that would be.
Yeah,
that'd be
and then
really
there's
helpful.
always like doing something like the Daniels or something like that, or try to come
But
up
they
with
both were named Daniel.
exactly. We just couldn't. We just couldn't with a straight face like have one of those kind of duo names or
Yeah,
whatever.
like radio
and so we were
silence,
just
like
like
we weren't
the tiebreaker. I think was just alphabetical. You know what I mean?
I think that's how it goes. I mean, as I said, like my godfather Tom and Andy, I'm like, oh, why isn't Andy and Tom? He's like, oh, it just sounded better,
Yeah.
Tom
Yeah.
and Dandy. And I was
Yeah.
like, don't you ever feel weird about being the second one? And he said, no, because we're a creative part. He
Yeah.
met him
Yep.
in college, and they were college roommates and stuff, just similar. It's
That's
why I got
that's
that
the-
ampersand. It's doing the
Exactly.
work.
That's-
ampersand, and also
yeah.
that's a guild thing.
Yeah.
At
Yes.
least in the WG, when you have the ampersand, it signifies that you are a team.
That
Yeah.
is
I want to
right.
do the plus sign though. I
Ooh,
think
yeah,
like,
plus
like
sign's fun.
flesh plus blood.
Ooh,
like
yeah, yeah.
we got that going. So that's all the time that we have for today. But Dan and Bobby, are there any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
I think just because we didn't really discuss it at all, go see Novocaine. It opens March 14th. It is, I guarantee you will have a fun time at the movies. It's a great date movie. It's a great movie to see with your friends. It's a great movie to see by yourself.
Yeah, we've seen it with a crowd a couple times now, and it is a movie that's best experienced with people. There's a lot of like, crazy gore in it and these kind of wacky action scenes,
I'm
and it's
gonna
great to be
assume
able
that
to
it's
grab
a
onto
little
each other. And
wacky because
it's
I mean you
wacky.
have Scream and Monty
yeah.
Python
Oh,
and Terminator 2
This
as your
is not
references.
like this is not like a dour, super self-serious action movie. It is made with an audience in mind. We want people to watch it and have fun and see it in a theater.
This will be the best time you have in a movie theater that you've had in years.
Okay, I'm gonna hold you to that because my mom and I are gonna go and we're gonna go to the dine-in and we're gonna make a day
If
of
that
it.
if
Love
that
it.
is not the case, send me an email with your receipt of your
Yes.
ticket stub, and we will Venmo
No
you.
way, no.
the
I
price.
know the trailers have been so fun, and also I love all the billboards that are around Los Angeles
Yes.
right now. All the whoever's doing the marketing
Yeah,
on
shout
it.
out to Paramount Marketing
Shout
for
out to the
allowing us to
marketing.
have an illustrated key art. That was the
It's-
craziest thing when they
It
said
reminds
yes.
me of like what is that
The
Operation?
Yeah,
It reminds
exactly.
me of
That's what
Operation.
drew us to it too. And like we were so scared. We were like, oh, are they going to try to make it look more generic and just do like a big head poster of all the characters or something? And then when we saw that poster, we were like, oh my God, this is it. And luckily that was their favorite too. So here we are.
Again, fate, chance, who knows what it is, but there's a lot of that circling you guys.
An old lady in the bursar's office.
The old lady
It's
at
an
Paramount.
old lady
The old lady at Paramount.
Old lady bursar, OLBO.
Yeah, she used to work over at NYU and now she works at Paramount.
That's right. She followed us around.
The woman's probably gonna be like, I was 36 when that happened. Like,
Yeah, I was not an old lady.
That is it for today. So thank you guys so much for coming onto the show.
Thanks
to
for having
Dan
us.
Berk and Bobby Olsen.
Thank you.
And also make sure to go see Novocaine, which is in theaters starting March 14th. I'm Gala Avery, and this has been The Gala Show. The Gala Show is brought to you by Avery.com. This episode was executive produced by Roger Avery and produced by Gala Avery. Music composed by Andy Milburn. As always, I'm your host, Gala Avery. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. Despite me sharing the same last name with this charity, I don't have any affiliation with it, besides the fact that the issue is very near and dear to my heart. Did you know that in the United States, 2.7 million children currently have a parent in prison, and it's estimated that 10 million children have experienced parental incarceration at some point in their lives? I was one of these kids, and as an adult, I am really grateful to be able to give back to Project Avery. Their mission is to build leadership from within by supporting community through programs such as mentoring and outdoor education, and also to remove the stigma surrounding having a parent that's incarcerated. You don't have to feel alone. If you know a kid who could use these resources or would like to donate money or time to the charity, please go to Project Avery, that's AVARY.org, to check out what this amazing charity is all about. Again, that's projectavery.org. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart.